Sarah had always adored her golden retriever, Max. He was her loyal companion, especially since she lived alone in a quiet, rural area. One sunny day during their usual walk, Max picked up a plastic bag in his mouth, and Sarah noticed something moving inside. She couldn't believe her eyes when she looked closer and saw the movement, but the vet's reaction left her even more puzzled. At the vet's clinic, Max refused to let go of the bag, growling and backing away from Sarah, something he had never done before. When the vet saw what was inside, he immediately yelled for everyone to leave. His panic confused Sarah, making her fear for Max's safety. What could possibly be inside that plastic bag? Why was Max so protective of it? But before we dive into the story, make sure to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our exciting stories. Max had been Sarah's loyal companion ever since she adopted him from a city shelter during a visit to her parents. Life in the countryside was isolating at times, but Max had filled her days with joy. He loved exploring the forest around Sarah's home, often running off into the woods without a leash. But one day, Max disappeared, leaving Sarah searching frantically. Hours passed, and there was no sign of him. The following morning, Sarah set out again, determined to find him. After some time, she spotted Max, but something was wrong. He was sitting perfectly still, holding a plastic bag in his mouth, and inside, something moved. Sarah gasped as a small duck poked its head out of the bag. It was alive, but clearly not in good condition. Sarah immediately knew she needed to help, but Max wouldn't let go of the bag. After much effort, Sarah managed to bring the duckling and Max to the vet. The duckling, though weak, seemed to be hanging on. But the vet's reaction raised alarm. He seemed shocked, calling for an evacuation of the clinic. Sarah's concern grew, but she had no answers. Outside the clinic, chaos erupted. Police and health officials arrived swiftly, setting up barricades and sealing off the area. Sarah, holding the small duckling, was bombarded with questions from the authorities. "Where did you find it?" they asked urgently. Confused and scared, Sarah explained that Max had found the duckling near the lake, but she still didn't understand the full scope of the situation. Rumors spread quickly through the town. People whispered about a possible contagious disease, and the situation escalated with alarming speed. The local government took control, quarantining the area and issuing health warnings. The once peaceful town was now consumed by fear, all because of the little duckling Max had found. Back at home, Sarah couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of responsibility. Max was restless, pacing back and forth, sensing something was wrong. Sarah's parents called, offering their support, but she couldn't help but feel isolated, even with their comforting words. Her mind kept returning to the vet's terrified reaction. What did he see in the duckling that made him so alarmed? The days dragged on with little information. Officials tested both Sarah and Max, ensuring they hadn't contracted anything harmful. Sarah cooperated with every step, but the uncertainty gnawed at her. She couldn't sleep thinking about the little duckling, now quarantined and alone in a lab somewhere. She feared for its survival and wondered if Max had somehow sensed something about the bird that she hadn't. As the town remained on high alert, news stations began covering the incident. Reporters camped outside Sarah's house, eager for any updates. Sarah avoided them, focusing instead on Max and her own worry. She had never imagined that something so small could spark such an enormous reaction. Days passed, and finally, there was news from the officials. The duckling was indeed carrying a highly contagious disease, though not deadly to humans. The swift action taken by the vet had likely prevented a much larger outbreak. Sarah felt a strange mix of relief and guilt, knowing how close they had come to something far worse. The town slowly began to return to normal, but the incident left a lasting mark. Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the duckling, now dubbed Brave by the medical team caring for it. While the worst of the crisis seemed to be over, there were still lingering questions about how the duckling ended up by the lake and why Max had been so protective of it. Sarah's bond with Max deepened after the ordeal. Every day, she felt more grateful for his instincts and loyalty. Even though she had feared for him when he wouldn't release the bag, she now understood that he had somehow sensed the importance of the situation before anyone else did. Max had been her constant companion during lonely times, but now, more than ever, she realized just how special he truly was. As the news of the event spread, Sarah and Max became minor celebrities in their town. Neighbors who had once been distant started visiting, bringing food and asking about Max's heroic actions. Even the local school invited Sarah to speak to children about the incident, hoping to teach them about the importance of being kind to animals and the unpredictable connections between humans and nature. But despite the positive attention, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something larger had been at play. Ms. Green, a retired biologist who lived down the street, approached Sarah one evening. She spoke calmly, suggesting that perhaps the duckling's arrival was a sign of the changing environment around the lake. "Things are shifting, Sarah," Ms. Green said. "The wildlife has been behaving differently for months. Max might have picked up on that." Her words lingered in Sarah's mind as she thought back to the stillness around the lake on the day she found Max and the duckling. The once lively area had grown eerily quiet, devoid of the usual sounds of birds and animals. Could Ms. Green be right? Was the lake and its surrounding environment changing in ways she hadn't noticed before? The town eventually moved on from the event, but for Sarah, life was different now. Max remained by her side, always alert, as if still guarding the secret of the lake. And though Brave the duckling recovered and was released back into the wild, Sarah knew that their story wasn't just about an animal in need. It was a reminder of how fragile the balance of nature could be. As Brave returned to the wild, Sarah watched the duckling waddle away towards the water, its small figure disappearing into the reeds. It was a bittersweet moment, knowing that the little creature had survived and would thrive in its natural habitat. Max stood beside her, watching intently as if sensing the significance of the moment. Life in the small town slowly returned to its usual pace, but Sarah felt forever changed by the experience. The strange incident at the lake had opened her eyes to the delicate balance of the natural world and the deep connection she shared with Max. She could no longer ignore the subtle changes in the environment, the disappearing wildlife, the quiet forest, and the stillness of the lake. One afternoon, Sarah decided to revisit the lake. Max trotted along beside her, his tail wagging as they walked the familiar path through the woods. This time, the forest seemed more alive. Birds chirped in the trees, and the rustling of leaves hinted at small animals scurrying about. It was a comforting contrast to the eerie silence she had experienced just days before. When they reached the lakeside, Sarah stood by the water's edge, watching the gentle ripples that formed across its surface. Max, ever curious, sniffed around, occasionally glancing up at her. She thought about everything that had happened: the duckling, the vet's urgent response, the town's panic, and ultimately the unity it had brought to the community. Ms. Green's words echoed in her mind. Perhaps the strange behavior of the animals and the quietness of the lake were warnings of changes in the environment. Sarah made a mental note to stay more attuned to the subtle signs around her. Nature, it seemed, was speaking. She just had to listen more closely. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the water, Sarah felt a sense of peace. Max nudged her leg with his nose as if reminding her that they were in this together. She smiled down at him, grateful for his loyalty and the silent bond they shared. Together, they turned and began the walk home, leaving behind the mysteries of the lake. But Sarah knew that this was only the beginning. With Max by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. Whether it was another adventure in the woods or a deeper understanding of the world around them,